it's in a rough spot. Bill lost his fastball.
Joey Slye did kick 2 field goals in this game, so we might shed a tear when we see Joey split the rights against our boys.
Pop, what's going on, man?
Son, how you doing from the new West Coast studios over there?
Doing good. Yeah, a couple little upgrades around here, making some life moves, upgraded some of the pod equipment, upgraded some of the life equipment. It all kind of goes together, So from the official West Coast Dom and Pop studios, I'm coming at you live today, and we are talking preseason football.
Newly minted man cave. I like it.
Yes, sir. Nothing more exciting than preseason football, right? Just absolutely great stuff to get into. I'll be honest. I'll put the hand up. I made it about as long as Jayden Daniels did yesterday. After I saw Driscoll come in and bust that 41-yard run, I was like, I'm done. That's about it for me. Pop hung in there a little longer.
I watched the whole game, but it was definitely hard to stay focused. Definitely took a lot of wind out of the sails when Jayden dropped out.
Yeah. It's hard to regular season football. They're playing for something, but preseason football, it's like, we come on here, we say it all the time. Everything's going to be very vanilla. They're not really going to do a ton. You've seen what you've needed to see from Jayden at this point. I feel like we all kind of know. And for me, it's almost like, to a degree, it's like torturous because it's like, all right, I want to see him play a full game where it actually matters now. Like, I'm so excited. I really want to get to it, So that's where we're at right now. We're got one more preseason game to go, and then it's wheels up for the regular season. I can't believe training camp is basically over at this point because they're just kind of going through these game processes, and then we're on to Tampa Bay. We're on to week one.
You got to be our hype man. We got a lot of great stuff to talk about. Stay tuned in.
I'm hyped.
Stay tuned in.
I'm saying I can't believe how fast this has gone, and we're almost to the regular season. I'm hyping, man. Come on, Pop.
3 weeks?
Come on, Pop. It's almost there. 3 weeks. So we got to talk about now what we've seen so far in that preseason game, in that absolute barn burner that was Commanders versus Dolphins week 2 preseason. Just a thriller we witnessed there. But the best part, we've talked a little bit about it. We're going to keep talking about it today. Jayden Daniels, right? No surprise there. Well, probably a surprise there of just how good it's been. But played 2 series. Both should have been scoring drives. We'll get to the kicking situation later. A little bit of a disaster there. But went overall 10 for 12, 128. 1 rush for 13 yards on the ground, and his total preseason stats. So between 2 games, we obviously do not anticipate him to be playing in the next game. But the total preseason stats have been 12 for 15, 123 yards, 3 rushes for 16 yards on the ground, 1 rushing touchdown. So, Pop, give me your Jayden Daniels takes, man. How you feeling about JD at this point?
Yeah, I think it just looks like such a contrast, right? I mean, the ball is out of his hands quickly. It's very decisive. Even, one of the 2 missed passes was he's avoiding taking a sack, getting the ball out quickly over to Terry, which was an incompletion. I mean, it seemed like you called it out over text. It seemed like a very heady play.
It was, yeah.
So it's amazing how the overall operation looks so different. Right, it makes the offensive line look better. And then John Keim talked a lot about the fact that there's always that threat on those read option plays for Jayden to keep it. So there's this situation where B-Rob's going to benefit from that, and Eckler's going to benefit from that in the run game. So yeah, I mean, it looks amazing. It is probably the last that we're going to see of Jayden other than clips from practice for the next 3 weeks, because I think he'd be very doubtful to play. There's absolutely zero reason for him to play in that New England game. We can get to that later in our New England preview. But, yeah, it's impressive. I guess we can get into it. He had the one long run where DQ wanted him to get down, and there was a little bit of sideline action. But, it's great that Dan Quinn is coaching him up in that way, but you just see
Yeah.
this big smile on Jayden's face, like this kid that maybe just ate an extra cookie out of the cookie jar, he knows that maybe it's something he needed to do, but at the same time, he's just got this joy and exuberance for the game, and it's you love to see it. There's something special.
Yep.
There's something special about that kid. I think. We constantly try to look for comparisons, but I think Jayden Daniels is one of one. I think he just has such a unique skill set, comparatively speaking.
Yeah, I think it's just what we've seen from him. It's funny. We saw a lot of quick work yesterday. I mean, obviously, like what was the stat line? Like 10 for 12 for 128. So the ball's not going super far down the field. There was a lot of yak stuff. There's a lot of screens, which I think is indicative of what we're going to see from Kingsbury's offense for the most part, is get these guys. We've got a lot of guys with wheels. I mean, Diami's fast, Terry's fast, Dotson is fast.
We'll get the ball downfield a lot more, I think.
For sure.
In the normal course of things, right?
For sure. But I think in general, protecting Jayden, getting the ball out fast, keeping everybody in rhythm, quick decisions. I think that's going to be pretty indicative of what we're going to see this year. Of course, we will take more deep drops, go further down the field in situations where it's necessary, and to kind of keep the defense honest. But right now, I think we're seeing that element of Kingsbury's offense. And I'm used to seeing, it's funny, he threw that one kind of hitch route to Terry that was like perfectly timed, and it was down on the bottom end of the screen, and the camera was such that you couldn't see the ball. You couldn't see where the receiver was. And I'm so traumatized from Heineke and Howell and these guys that didn't necessarily have the accuracy or the arm strength or the combination of the two in order to make those tight window throws on the outside hashes and actually not get their receiver killed or put their receiver in position for yak. But Terry cuts back and the ball is perfectly on his outside shoulder so he could turn upfield and go. And it's like a perfect completion. He ends up going for like 13 yards, something like that. And I flinched when I saw the ball get thrown because I was expecting some kind of disaster. I'm like, ooh, that's not good. And it's just for 27 years of watching this team now, when I see a play like that, that's where I end up, is it's something bad. And so it's so refreshing to see he's just firing the ball out of his hand. There's touch where it needs to. That throwaway was great. Bottom line is, sometimes the defense makes a play. There's going to be pressure. Quarterbacks are going to get hit. Quarterbacks are going to get sacked. He realized that. He realized he's in a 3rd and long situation. He realized if he gets sacked, maybe you're out of field goal range. And he just, without even thinking about it, and he realizes, hey, second series of a preseason game, let me not get myself killed. He just flicks it out of bounds.
Yeah.
And he just makes a throw that, if he completes that pass, it's probably the number one play. Well, with what Caleb Williams is doing, I don't know, but it might be the number one play on SportsCenter this week if he completes that pass. But it's not a pass you ever expect somebody to make. He's just smart about it, gets the ball out, goes to his hot read, gets rid of it, and you keep on moving. I'm sure in his head he wishes he could have given Terry a chance, but no risk. You kick the field goal. You should take 3 there. With this team, maybe you're not taking 3 as many times as you think you're going to be taking 3, unfortunately, right now. But that's my Jayden breakdown, man. Everything, I think you've seen everything positive from this kid so far. He just continues to ace every test you give him. And let's see what he's got for week 1 in Tampa, because I don't think we're going to see him next week.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, right? You can't avoid the Caleb Williams, Jayden Daniels comparisons. And, I didn't, watching the highlights and a lot of the throws that Caleb made, obviously there's some special plays there, and he looks amazing. So not taking anything away from Caleb. We haven't seen as much of that off-schedule stuff from Jayden, but it's been kind of by design. But his ability to execute the offense, and like I said, get the ball out on time and get credit. The receivers being in the right spots, getting some separation for him. Early in the route tree, it's compliment to Kingsbury, but also just looks, like I said, just looks so different, so smooth and so decisive. And just the speed at which his release and the speed at which the ball comes out. it's very unique and very different, especially when you start to add in the future his ability to escape, his ability to run the ball. It just seems all very, very just pro ready, and I think that's just what makes Jayden unique to me, right? And maybe we'll see more of that off schedule stuff, as we go forward, right? But I just think his decisiveness and his presence in the pocket, I don't think we've seen that from
Yeah.
such a young player in a very long time. And I'm not just talking about in Washington. I'm talking about in the league, and hopefully he can keep it up. We've all been pumping our brakes and very cautiously optimistic when it comes to Jayden, but all we can go with is the sample size that we have so far, and it's impressive. It's very impressive.
Agreed.
And
Yeah.
I think something about it is disappointing to have 2 drives and in field goal attempts and only getting 3 points out of that. But I think that you only got 2 drives to see, and I think this has been one of those games that had been a regular season game. It would have built the momentum because they were moving the ball. There was a positive momentum to that offense where that next drive, it's kind of like in soccer where you're kind of threatening to score, and at some point that goal is coming. I think at some point those points would have started coming very soon after, in the half. And I think that momentum was building, and, that was great to see.
Yeah, I think it's just the kind of thing where, you're not calling plays the way you're going to be calling plays in the regular season. Of course, you're kind of just quick game, easy stuff, lots of hitches, nothing too crazy, and you just want to work on that timing, build that chemistry. Obviously, you're going to be going downfield more in a regular season game, which maybe keeps you out of some of those field goal situations. Let's talk recap other than Jayden Daniels. I think we've talked a lot about JD. I think we like what we saw. Let's talk a little bit about kind of what stood out. What are the strengths? What are the weaknesses of the team? What are some things that we like? I think for me, I want to start off. I think what a difference having Wiley and Big Luke back at tackles. Now, are they the premier tackles of the NFL and the best right and left tackle duo we've seen since the Hogs? No. But are they legitimate NFL starters? Yes. And that is a huge step from where we were in the last batch of guys. So I'm pretty stoked to see those guys back. See the offensive line, I think, is performing a little bit above what you would expect them to perform or how they'd perform at this point in time. But I think they are generally doing pretty well. We'll see how Coleman can come back with that shoulder injury. I think reports continue to get kind of more and more negative about him coming back from that pec injury and whether or not, like, now we're starting to hear rumblings about, I don't know if he's going to be ready to go week 1 and blah, blah, blah.
I heard that.
So we'll see. We'll see what happens with Brandon Coleman. Obviously, he will provide a boost, but when you draft a tackle in the 3rd round, you don't necessarily expect that guy to start week 1 anyway. So maybe he was ahead of schedule. Now he had this injury. Maybe he's more on schedule now, and you think by like week 3 or 4, maybe week 5 or 6, you start to work him in. I think generally that was probably the plan.
Would be bad news.
Anyways. Of course, it would be bad news. It's not what you want. Yes, that would be bad news, Pop. But it's still about, I don't know. Pop,
bringing me down. I thought he was in pads during the Dolphins practice.
Maybe Pop wants to pull the panic alarm. You want to pull the panic alarm?
I'm starting to panic a little bit. Yeah, I mean, I think your point is well taken. I think the offensive line has actually looked a lot better than I expected. I think you've said it. A lot of that has to do with the scheme, and how quickly Jayden's getting the ball out of his hands, but I mean, even when the backup quarterbacks are in there, it doesn't look like we're seeing a lot of jailbreaks. We're not getting a lot of sacks in general. So it's looked better, and I mean, even some of the backup guys, the Trent Scotts of the world, the Braden Daniels of the world, although he's been shifted more to guard. The tackle Chris Paul. I mean, I know that you were kind of dogging him a bit, deservedly so, but I think he's at least been competitive when he's had to play tackle. Again, he's going up against backups for the most
Yeah.
part, but it hasn't looked disastrous. So I'll give a little check mark. I'll give a little trend up check mark to the offensive line. We do need a healthy Braden Daniels, though. I
Yeah.
mean, not Brandon Coleman. Sorry about that.
Yeah. Whoa.
Yeah.
Well, I think we do have a player named Braden Daniels.
We do.
Is not gonna make the team.
That's right.
I think that was a 4th round draft pick. Anyways, let's keep it moving here. For a position group that I think is worse than expected, or so far has raised a little bit more concerns, which, I'll be honest with you, is really disappointing for me. And I think this is just an issue of, hey, this team was 4-13 last year. And I know we say, talented. I know our friend Lou was on the pod a couple months ago. He said maybe the most talented 4-13 team ever, right? And I know as fans, we like to say that. And, there's some merit to that for sure. But you have a real case for this as the worst defensive back group in the NFL right now. You have a real case for that. And you have Dan Quinn and Joe Witt Jr. that are studs and obviously know how to coach a secondary and are known for that. That's their claim to fame. That's why Dan Quinn got a second shot as a head coach from an X's and O's perspective, is at least, right? And they can only do so much with what they've got. And you've got, Michael Davis is going to start on the outside. He was the 3rd cornerback for the Chargers last year. Benjamin St-Juste probably going to start opposite for him. He was the 3rd cornerback for us last year. You lost Kendall Fuller. Now you've got Emmanuel Forbes, who has began to flash in some situations, I guess. I don't know. I kind of got dogged for not being excited about him last week. I'm going to stand by that. I don't see it with that kid. But we've got Forbes, that's 1st-round draft capital. Sanderstill is pretty much the only bright spot. And Martin, I would say him and Quan Martin are kind of the only bright spots in the secondary right now. But that defensive back room is looking rough, Pop.
Yeah, I think we're going to get into some position group talk the second half of the pod, so we'll get deeper into that and what we think that depth chart looks like. For me, in terms of the game itself, I would say what I didn't like was that the Dolphins carving us up on that first drive.
Wolf.
Right? I mean, it looked pretty easy. It looked like 2023-esque in terms of our defense. Now, granted, we're missing most of the starting defensive line, so that's a lot to be missing. We're also, we're missing Bobby Wagner. I think most of the secondary was playing.
Yeah,
I haven't really heard Michael Davis's name called very much. I know St-Juste got burned on the touchdown against a backup receiver.
Yeah,
but I think we're going to get into the position group a little bit. But I guess what I didn't like was as close to their starting offensive group and as close to our starting defensive group with knowingly the players were out. But I mean, if Tyreek Hill's playing, it ain't getting any better, right?
Yeah.
Or Jayden Waddle's playing, it's not getting any better. So, that was troubling to me. How easily they moved the ball down the field. I'd say I didn't like that so much.
I mean, just you can't get beat off the release in single coverage in the red zone like that the way St-Juste did. I mean, that was just he didn't have. You watch the replay on that. He flipped his hips late. He was behind on the route, and on top of that, he had the wrong leverage. Maybe that's a coaching thing. You don't know. And on top of that, he didn't have a chance from the second the ball was snapped. I mean, he was beat from the second Tua called hike. He never had a chance. And with a quarterback like Tua, I mean, that's what he's known for. He's going to find that, and he's going to hit the ball. He's going to hit the guy where he needs to be hit every single time. So that was awful. That was a really, really bad play by St-Juste there, and gives up 7. And it's a tough spot to be in with this DB group, and that might be a place where we just see like, look, this team might lose 8-9 games, and that could be a place where that's just we're getting gouged on the outside at cornerback. Sanderstill, it's such a bittersweet thing for me because he's so great and he's really good, and you think, holy crap, we got one, but he's also a slot corner. So you're not going to necessarily see him shutting down A.J. Brown, shutting down C.J. Lamb, or C.D. Lamb, excuse me. Now, you hope he could do that, and you saw he kind of did that, flashed in that in the joint practices against Tyreek in one-on-ones, and in situations where they do come into the slot, they might be taken care of, but he's a slot corner. We need help on the outside. We're in a disastrous situation on the outside right now. I'm slamming the panic button.
I also think that, Forbes kind of talked about it. He did an interview, and he talked about how he feels like he's under a microscope and he makes one mistake, and that's the headline. He can make 9 good plays and makes one mistake. I mean, corners are going to get beat by good receivers. They just are. It's advantage receivers. So I understand the panic button. I'm not going to argue the panic button. We're kind of killing the segment we were supposed to do later here and by getting deep into this, but we'll get back into it a little bit later. But let's save my additional takes for the later segment on the secondary group. I'll hold it for that.
Sure. So then let's quickly go through those awards here. So I think it's pretty obvious. I think the Sauce Award has got to be Jayden Daniels. I think that's going to be the overall preseason Sauce Award. Spoiler alert. I'm sure we'll do it later. But you got to give Jayden Daniels a Sauce Award. Not much more to say that hasn't been said. Cannot wait for 4:25 p.m. Eastern time at Tampa Bay, Week 1. Let's see this kid in action. I'm done waiting.
So exciting.
I'm impatient. I'm fired up. Let's see 4 quarters of Jayden Daniels. I want to see how that looks because I think it's going to look pretty darn good.
Got a fantasy draft a week from today.
Yep, that's right. I got to start prepping, man. I'm in the scouting department over here is at an all-time low this summer. It's bad. But helmet stickers. We got Brian Robinson, who's just looked great. You're not too worried about him at all. There's no reason to be worried about what we got going on at running back.
2 11-yard runs. That was really good to see.
Yeah, I think it's a guy that can surprise people this year. I think, frankly, if you are surprised by Brian Robinson, you've been asleep at the wheel, but that's fine. You got Jamin Davis, had a strip sack, fumble, force fumble, whatever you want to call it. Starting to kind of flash a little bit more and more as you're starting to kind of put him in better position. Now, is this a guy that I think is going to get signed to, $150 million extension at the end of this year? And you're going to go, wow, what an amazing pick. Probably not. Right. But me and Pop were talking about it, and we'll probably get into it a little bit when we talk wide receivers in the next segment. You got to field 53 of these guys. You drafted him with the first round pick. He's got some talent. Find a way to figure out how he can help you because he's at least good enough to be on the roster, right?
Yeah, and Nikki Jabala tweeted out, that we can put whether Jamin Davis is going to make the team talk to bed. That he's made his way on the team, and I kind of look at it and go, so far in the preseason, it's the preseason. Who have you seen flash more, KJ Henry or Jamin Davis?
Davis.
Yeah. So I think that as much as Davis maybe gets dogged, his talent and his skill set, and I think the fact that he's able to play either D-line or linebacker, if he had to go back to linebacker in a pinch because of injury, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. It's not like he can't play the position. So I think, kudos to Jayden coming up big. He needed that. He got complicated by DQ. And I think that's, we talked about the need for this team to create turnovers. He's the only one that's done it so far, I believe, in the preseason. Yep. I think he well-deserved helmet sticker there.
Yeah, and especially you've got a injury going on with Jordan McGee right now, so you're gonna have
that could be bad.
Yeah, it sounds like something you don't like. So far, it just sounds like a knee injury that needs some more testing. I don't know what more there is to that, but he certainly flashed, and that's a guy that is a late round guy. He's going to need reps. And so you're setting him behind on reps, unfortunately. And when you've got a guy like Jamin who can play a little bit of edge, can help out at linebacker, like you said, in a pinch, we know how scary that linebacker depth can get. We've had some tough injuries at linebacker, and we've had some bad linebacker depth in the past. So You've got Wagner. You've got Luvu. McGee, question mark. Davis is probably your next guy up there to help out at linebacker, unless I'm missing someone, Pop. But you're going to need him there. So, he's making this team. He's making this team for sure. And I think that's pretty much. Did you have anybody else you wanted to give a helmet sticker to? Pop Diami Brown, right?
Yeah. I mean, he had 3 catches early. Looks like a whole new player to me. We'll see if it sticks. But you see the size, you see some toughness. I mean, these were down the field routes. These were shorter routes. I mean, not necessarily so over the middle, still wide, but he looks really good. It's amazing. He looks really, really good. And we're gonna get into the receiver depth chart as part of the second half of the pod, but I think see him featured like that. Terry had a couple of really nice plays too, but I think Diami deserves a helmet sticker.
Yeah, and I mean he's a guy that is flashed before in practice, in training camp, but the level at which we continually to see him flash now is pretty exciting. So I think we'll talk a little bit more wide receiver in the next segment. So we'll probably wait on that to go too in depth. But yeah, Diami, I think, you might be, it's a big gap, but Diami might be runner up for preseason sauce award behind Jayden. I think it's been the player that surprised you the most out of this preseason. I think if you told me, we remember when Sanders showed up to OTAs wearing the number 2 and we were all cracking Diami Brown jokes and saying that's the end of them.
Yeah.
Pretty good to see that turnaround.
Yeah.
So let's.
I think I'd say, we got to move on, but a couple honorable mentions. I think Luke McCaffrey, showed up and made some nice plays in the second half.
Sure.
I think, Luvu looked pretty strong.
You expect that, yep.
Looked amazing as well early on. So a couple honorable mentions there. But let's get on to the people segment.
Yeah.
Not only kick-cots of the game, but kick-cots of the week.
Kick-cots of the preseason at this point. This kicking situation is a disaster, man. Riley Patterson looks like me on the tee box right now. It's going right. It's going left. It's short. It's spinny. It's not decisive. He looks not confident. And, Pop brought this up in the meeting, and I thought this was a really great point, and I'm going to steal it. I'm going to deliver it for you here, Pop. Take accountability on that. That's my bad. The whole I don't think our starting kicker's on the roster being like a point of comfort is not comforting at all, right?
Who's available?
I'm old enough to remember the Chris Blewett situation. I'm old enough to remember when we cut Dustin Hopkins and Ron used him as a sacrificial lamb, even though he was a good kicker. And we went down the whole just disaster that was the kicker situation after that, right? It's a mess. So, Joey Sly did end up coming out of that. Joey Sly, at this point, what would you give to have Joey Sly back, Pop?
Who knew?
My God.
The thing is, it looks bad. There's no question about it. Apparently, Patterson had a great joint practice, but I would even argue kicking in a joint practice is much different than kicking in a game.
Of course.
Stadium full. It really looked like nerves and shanks, and that's not good. Let's just hope he figures it out, because I agree with you. Counting on picking up a kicker off the street or someone that gets cut, there's nothing to say they're going to be any better than what we have. And I tell you, I guess we'll just start going for it a whole lot more. But if we lose games because of the kicking situation, that would just hurt. That's so bad. That would be such an Ashburn moment with your Ashburn syndrome shirt on.
Of course. Yeah, of course. It's not a matter of if. When we lose games because of this kicking situation.
You're so positive. That's what I like about you.
Look at what we're seeing right now. Do you have any doubt that Riley Patterson's going to cost us a couple games if he's our starting kicker all year?
Yeah.
You just don't want to be in that situation. So I don't think we will be in that situation. I think they will address it, but I tweeted it out, and this is also kind of in relation to when we talk about our secondary situation later in the segment. But if this is going to be a team that surprises people, we can't have this kicker situation, because if you want to do the team that surprises people narrative, you're talking about winning close games against teams that might be more talented than you. That comes down to a missed extra point. That comes down to a kick. That comes down to a botched kickoff. those kinds of things. And you can't have any confidence in any of that with Patterson right now.
Well, I said it earlier about this be the last thing I'll say on this topic. It's panic button. I know it doesn't look good. It's a real concern. It's a gut punch to think that the damn kicking game could nuke games for us. Having said that, kickers are like what we said about cornerbacks. Cornerbacks are going to get burned. Kickers are going to miss kicks. Let's just hope he's getting them out of his system right now and that he becomes much more reliable going forward. And maybe Dan Quinn knows that because he's trying to build his confidence. You could see what he's saying because he probably knows that I could start this revolving door of kickers, but it's going to be a crapshoot at this point. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely a major concern. Kick Cott's worthy without a doubt. That could have been a different game. I mean, honestly, we could have been a field goal away at the end there where, not that wins and losses matter, but if you mirror the regular season with the results of this, all we need to do is kick a field goal to win if he makes those first two instead of having to go for a touchdown there at the end. So, it sucks right now.
Yeah, no two ways about it. Very profound conclusion there from Pop. I agree. I think that's the best way you could say it. I think we probably could have saved ourselves 2-3 minutes there and just said, hey, kicking sucks right now.
Exactly.
Exactly. But that's got to be the kick hot. So I say we move on to the next segment, Pop. Are you about ready to move on?
We should.
All right. So let's talk a little New England preview. Now, if we're talking the spectrum of most exciting football games in the world, you got Kansas City Chiefs versus Philadelphia Eagles Super Bowl at number 10, and you got Commanders, New England Patriots Week 3 preseason game. It's got to be number 9 on the scale, right? Like it's right there. Like this might be the most exciting, most thrilling thing you could possibly watch. Joe Milton compete against Jeff Driscoll for 4 quarters. So in terms of a Patriots scouting report, it's pretty simple. This is the most humble team in the NFL right now, to put it nicely. This team sucks. This team stinks. This is a Patriots fan you have talking here. This is a guy that the Patriots are my second team. Whenever the Patriots are on, I root for them. Spent a lot of time in Boston. I really like the Pats. Man, it is rough there right now. You've got your 5th or 6th rounder in Milton outperforming Drake May in camp. You have no idea what's going on with Drake May. And then you've got Jacoby Brissett, who, good backup, good dude, not an NFL starter. We've established that. That's been established over the course of his career.
That last preseason game for sure.
Yeah, tough situation there. You've got a new offensive coordinator there that you don't really know about. You've got a new head coach in Gerard Mayo that you don't really know about. Disaster. And they just traded away to the Atlanta Falcons. They just traded away Matthew Judon, who I might have made a phone call about, but that's besides the point. They just lost the one thing that they had going for them on defense was that guy, Matthew Judon, this stud pass rusher, traded away to Atlanta for, I think it was like a 3rd rounder. So not much to worry about in terms of skill positions. You figure if the DBs can't get it done against this group, woof, we should really be nervous. But I don't even know if our starting DBs are going to be playing. I mean, you figure a lot of starters are not going to play this game. This is for the 48 to 53 guys.
Right.
This game is for the guys that are barely going to make the roster. So I don't think you see Jayden Daniels playing. I don't know what combination of Drake May or Milton you're going to see, or Brissett.
Drake May had a decent game against the Eagles. I mean, giving credit where credit is due. He looked all right. He led them to two scoring drives. I mean, it wasn't.
Yeah.
He didn't blow the doors off, but he looked okay.
I think he's a solid player, man. I think he's a developmental piece. That's what they're going for right now. And it seems like New England is just embracing the tank and getting ready to just rebuild and build the roster back up because it's in a rough spot. Bill lost his fastball.
Joey Slye did kick 2 field goals in their last game. So we might shed a tear when we see Joey split the rights against our boys.
You think Josh can just bring him a tray of wings with mumbo sauce and be like, Joey, listen, man, we're so lost without you, dude. Are you sure you don't want to come back? Those winters up in New England are brutal, man. Those winters are tough. It's only an hour. If you rented a condo, it's cool. It's only an hour flight. We could have you back here in no no issue. But yeah, it's a tough situation there. But yeah, I mean, don't expect the starters to play much. Is there anything you're really looking out for here, Pop, against New England?
It's rough. I mean, I guess you look at you watch the backups play. I mean, it's interesting what our philosophy's been. You see the defensive line; most of our defensive line haven't played. Makes perfect sense to me that you got John Allen, who's a vet, and some of the other guys like Armstrong and what have you. I mean, I think it makes perfect sense. They're not playing. You're not going to see Bobby Wagner again. Not going to see Jayden Daniels. I mean, I think we're pretty well set. That wouldn't make any sense for Jayden to play. I think he's in a T-shirt for that game. So, yeah, I mean, I guess you could, Driscoll's shown pretty well for himself. At the quarterback, situation in general. I don't know whether, Sam is going to be well enough to play, or they just bury him maybe he goes on the injury list and gets a roster spot that way. But yeah, it's hard to get excited. I don't know. I don't know if there's any. I think we're going to go through a couple of position groups, but I think if we went through all the position groups, I'm not sure how many spots are really open at this point. Yeah. I think we're probably down to a couple real question marks at this point.
Yeah, and I think we'll maybe do a more in-depth pod on that as we get to
some
cut
time.
Day. Yeah. Because there's going to be, after this preseason game, we've got some downtime before. So that's when we'll get into like our more national predictions and roster projections and that kind of stuff. Do the schedule recap one more time for fun. But yeah, I say we move on in terms of the preseason stuff. There's not much to talk about there. Like you said, there's maybe only a couple open spots, and we can evaluate that when we get into roster discussion later. I
mean, I think this Pats game is just indicative of the preseason is just painful in many ways. Right? I mean, it's been really cool to see 3 drives of Jayden Daniels, no question about it. Right, that's been worth the price of admission. But the rest of it, it's just it's hard to watch. Honestly, it's cool for those depth guys on the roster to get their opportunity to flash, but it's tough. So
over under.
Sorry for the lack of hype about this Pats game, but I think it's really just a matter of getting past the game, and then I think some of our next couple of topics will be pretty interesting to get into when we look at wide receiver, who we expect to make the team at wide receiver, which is going to be surprising when we run through the numbers, and then that secondary, what that looks like, I think is probably going to be more interesting as we start to really get into, because I think what becomes interesting after the Pats game is then we're going to have cuts, right? Yep. That's the next big milestone, is seeing who makes this team, who lands on the practice squad. What are we looking at there? Which, like you said, we'll get into. We'll do post-game Pats, which probably will take 5 minutes, hopefully. Not much more to talk to than that. Hopefully, that it's not uneventful. But we'll get into what that roster might look like on the next pod. I think that'd be a great topic to talk about.
Sure. Over under 28.5 minutes watched of the preseason game.
I'll probably watch the whole thing unless I got nothing better to do.
It's a sicko, man. This guy's an absolute
I'll watch
sicko.
The whole thing. What else I got to do?
I don't know. We're going to have to see how it fits into the schedule. I might make an appearance. I don't know about 28.5 minutes. I don't think I got that in me, but we'll see. But let's get into this wide receiver situation. We've teased it enough. Right. We've talked about it, right? It's time to talk wide receiver. What's going on there, man? Because I think it's pretty clear at this point when you do the math. You heard.
Yeah, let's run through it. Real quick. Who we think the 6 are, right?
I think we've got Terry, obviously. So the locks for sure: Terry, Diami at this point, Jahan, Oz, Zacchaeus, McCaffrey, and then Jamison Crowder is going to be a lock because he's your punt returner, right?
Thank you. Said as much.
Yeah. So you've got 6 there. That's a guarantee. And I think past just Jamison Crowder being your punt returner, I think he can help you out in the slot if you need him.
I think he's a pro.
Yeah. So that's your 6. You've heard rumblings of Mitchell Tinsley and Bryson Tremaine and the undrafted kid from Georgia, the tall guy. Look, practice squad, maybe if they keep 7 receivers, one of them makes it, but you just don't see those 6, I think, are going to be the guys there, right? But what's more interesting is what's going on with the order. Who's playing where? Who do we think is going to lead in terms of targets after Terry, of course? Who do we think is going to take on that number 2 role after Terry? What's happening there? Because you have Terry McLaurin and then you have a bunch of dudes that are kind of all good at almost the same thing and all fighting for who's going to break out of that pack. I got my prediction. I don't know what yours is, Pop.
Yeah, so I think the question there is like who after Terry, who gets the most targets this season, right? That's the interesting question. And I still think at the end of the day it's Jahan, right? I think that I saw a quote from Cliff Kingsbury. I think it was one of the last press conferences he did, and he really talked very glowingly about Jahan. Dan Quinn on the last press conference kind of backpedaled a little bit and said, "Hey, I didn't mean this to turn into, a negative commentary about Jahan, right? It's just that we're competing at every position and all of that." But I think at the end of the day, I think it's still going to be Jahan. I'm gonna bet on Jahan being the guy that ends up being number 2. But I don't know that we've got a true number 2. I think it's going to get spread around. I think Diami's going to get his. I think Zacchaeus does some really nice things in the slot. I don't really expect too much out of McCaffrey or Crowder other than maybe coming in as backups if necessary. Yep. I know like depth chart wise, I'll just throw in this one. Doesn't really answer your question, but I know Kazmir Allen's a guy that is an example of somebody that was they're very interested in his talent. His speed is electrifying, but he can't catch the ball, and he doesn't seem to be able to hold on to it as a runner. And so he's a guy that I don't think makes the final roster. He's gonna they tried to work him in at running back a little bit. I mean, I just don't see it. I don't see that working. But I'm going to stick with Jahan. I think Jahan's going to end up being, he had a horrible year last year and had 50 catches. 50 catches is probably number 2 on this team. And I think that Kingsbury can unlock him much better than what we were able to do last year, both at quarterback and coaching, quite frankly. I mean, if Kingsbury and, he seems to have a tight relationship with Jayden as well. So I'm sure Jayden's going to want to try to get him involved. So I'm going to stick with Jahan there.
Yeah. I really hope 50 catches is not second on this team because that's about 3 catches a game. So I hope if Jahan is the guy, he's catching a little bit more than 50 balls. But I think personally, I got Diami at this point. I think it's going to feed the hot hand. I think you got to go with the fact that, look, Rivera was known for playing his guys longer. I mean, look at what happened with William Jackson. He was playing his guys longer because he went out on a limb to get those guys. He spent first-round capital on Jahan. Jahan was getting the opportunity ahead of Diami. Jahan did not look good last year, has had a up-and-down training camp / preseason at best. Diami is hot, is solid. If JP and other reporters keep saying this, it's just the general consensus. If you were Dan Quinn right now and you basically got dropped on this team with no prior knowledge of course he's seen the tape, of course he believes in the scouting that's happened before him and whatever, and he has his own evaluations. But if you're evaluating things as if everybody's equal today, which is what it should be, because you didn't spend any of those draft picks, and it shouldn't matter where a guy's drafted, who's playing the best. And at this point, Diami is clearly the number 2 wide receiver on this team. And then you wonder, I think the battle for me is going to be Jahan, Zacchaeus, who's getting that slot work at number 3. But I think Diami is more of a true flanker on the outside. I think Jahan can do well on the outside, and that gives you some optionality in terms of moving guys around and creating mismatches and stuff like that. But I worry about, particularly with Jahan's skill set, I worry about him getting off of the press. And that's something that just we haven't seen progress on. And if he can't get off the press in the NFL, he certainly can't play on the outside. Maybe he can be used in the slot more where it's harder to press guys. But I think Diami's going to be that number 2 guy, and I think he's going to have more than 50 catches this year for sure.
I hope so. I mean, it's interesting, right? You look at the flip flop there. I mean, Diami's a guy that many people were talking about. Does he even make the roster? I think we said that.
He was the butt of the joke. Hand up. He was the butt of the joke for years here. Yeah.
All of a sudden, now it's great. I mean, it's great to see. I'm a big believer, right? We've talked about it. I think that tryouts should be meaningful, whether it be high school sports, college sports, pro sports. I mean, it's great the fact that we've started with a clean slate. It doesn't matter, like you said, it doesn't matter where a guy was drafted. The guys that are playing the best get the opportunities. And I think that's terrific, right? And I think Jahan, certainly from what we've seen, we've heard about in practice, not Jahan, Diami, sorry. Diami has really earned what he's got. But I do think that Jahan, you could argue that we reached again similar to Emmanuel Forbes, but he was a first-round talent. He's a talented kid. He has a good skill set. Yeah, he's been in a little bit of a rut. I'd love to see Diami break out. That'd be awesome. And I think you make some really good arguments. I'm not really gonna counter them because I don't really have a strong counter to them. I feel like Jahan has a little bit more of that short game, screen game. Maybe he picks up some opportunities. We've seen him out of the backfield too. So maybe he picks up some opportunities that way. But then you could argue that he might lose some of that to Zacchaeus, who has a similar skill set. What Diami does in terms of getting downfield, he could be the best on the team, right? Terry's great at it, but Terry's really good at everything, right? Contested catches. But if you really just look at running that post play, Diami might be your best weapon on the team for that. And so, he's got a bit of a unique skill set for this team, right?
Yeah.
And so that does give him an advantage for sure.
Now, I'm not saying when I say Diami's going to be the wide receiver 2, I'm not saying Diami's going to be better than Devonta Smith and T. Higgins and Jalen Waddle. And I don't think he's anywhere in that class. But I think for this team, unfortunately, and I think the fact that Diami Brown is going to be your wide receiver 2 this year is a statement of the fact that wide receiver is a position of need going forward on this team for sure, if not now. But
look, I mean, we're not going to have a Ron Rivera discussion because this would be the longest pod in history if we did that. But I mean, there was a situation where Ron, to quote JP Finley, was always trying to be the smartest guy in the room and pick these guys that you didn't expect them to pick and then convince you that they were the right pick. And, I think Dotson and Forbes, who we're going to get into that position battle next, are a little bit of that. I think, but I also think these guys are talented players. I mean, you take Diami Brown as an example. Here's a guy that was written off, but here's a guy that had always had the potential and always had that talent. Maybe what he needed was a little better coaching.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what he's getting now, right? And, credit to him for maybe a spark was lit, has a little bit of success. That success builds on each other. But, it's an interesting position. I think you're right. I mean, as much talk as there has been about wide receiver, it's pretty clear who those 6 guys are. If they go 7 deep, I guess that'll be where the battle is. But, maybe they stash a couple of these guys on the practice squad. We spent a lot of time on secondary earlier in the pod, but I would say that's the other position group that we have a lot of concerns about. Let's try to hit that pretty quick.
Yeah.
But, I think for me, I'll start. I think, you look at safety and you feel pretty decent about it, right?
Of course.
I mean, you got Quan Martin, Jeremy Chin, Derek Forrest, Percy Butler, Jeremy Reeves. You feel pretty decent now. Reeves has had a little bit of a tough preseason. But he's a proven vet. Maybe he's coming off that injury, struggling a bit. But I feel pretty good about safety. I think the question really comes in the corner. Now, you talk about corners. You got St. Juice, you got Michael Davis, and you got Forbes and Sanistril, of course. And of those 4 guys, one you're pretty excited about. The other 3 you're kind of not sure. Just not sure is the best way. Could work out, maybe it doesn't. And then after that, there's a huge drop off. Like I couldn't even honestly talk to how good a player Castro feels or I'll just call him. I don't even know how good a player these guys are. I don't have a read on them. So
they're not NFL starters. They're barely NFL backups. I don't even know if
are they
NFL
even?
backups.
Yeah, they backups.
I don't think we have an NFL starting outside cornerback. I think we will by default have a starter, but I don't think we have one. I wanted to kind of let you run that segment, Pop. I gave my thoughts on it earlier in the pod. If you guys are watching the Thursday edit, go back.
But what's give us your final thoughts? What's your general? I know you said you're hitting the panic button, but what's your like best case scenario, worst case scenario with the secondary? Like, what do you give me? Just a little bit of juice before we end this thing.
I mean,
60 seconds on the clock.
Best case scenario, Benjamin St. Juice returns.
You were pretty high on him earlier in the season.
I thought he could. I thought he could take a step forward. Best case scenario, he returns to form, which that form was being a top, 15 to 20 cornerback in the NFL. Best case scenario, he gets back to that. I'm not betting on it. I'd say worst case scenario is, I think, pretty close to what we're living out, which is the outside cornerback situation is going to be an issue. We're going to need our pass rush. And that is the thing that I think we haven't seen yet because Payne and Allen aren't playing. But we're going to need that pass rush, man. We're going to need Dan Quinn to consistently be bringing the heat. We're going to have to, win on the defensive line to make up for this because we cannot. These cornerbacks are rough, man. It's a tough situation. So we're going to need, Armstrong and Farrell and Fowler and Payne and Allen and Luvu and Davis. We're going to need those guys to really put pressure on the quarterback, and we're going to have to win. Like, you can't do much if you're not winning in the trenches.
Maybe we got to challenge Sanister to be more than a slot corner on this team, right? And maybe he can do that. Maybe he he ends up being CB1, and I think there is a tendency to overreact. It's not a good look that both St. Just and Forbes got beat on fades with backup receivers in the 2 preseason games. It's not a good look, but that's one play each. So my only point would be maybe we have a little tendency to overreact when it comes to the corners. That would be my point and my hope that it's an overreaction. Otherwise, you're right. We're in trouble.
We'll see. I mean, you do run pretty vanilla schemes in the preseason, and maybe there's more disguises and things that you can do in the secondary, and you can put these guys in positions where they're not in as many situations where they're weak in, but I just don't know where this group is strong in coverage right now. But
you got to hope you've added a superstar there.
Yeah, but that's one guy. I mean, even if we get Mikey Island, right? Like, there's still the other side of the field, and if the other side of the field is that bad, they'll still be okay. But it's going to be what it's going to be, man.
These coaches are known for coaching up corners, so they got a lot of work to do.
If they can make this group serviceable, I'll never question them.
We're not worthy.
Yeah, that would be godly. But I say we wrap this thing up, Pop. What do you say?
Yeah, I think we should.
Yeah, well, without further ado.
If you made it this far, Dom owes you something to steal from JP Finley.
Yeah, I guess so. Let's wrap this thing up. Without further ado, I've been Dom.
This is Pop.
Thanks for another great week, everybody.